Welcome to the Dumb Idea Podcast Show with Mike and Alex. We thank you for joining us as we have a couple of beers and a cigar and talk about what's going on in our lives. Grab an adult beverage and a smoke and settle in with us. Please like, subscribe, and comment on each show so we can hear whether you agree or disagree with our take on things. Listen wherever your favorite podcasts are and at www.dumbideapodcast.com. We both had a friend that is going through a divorce, and it got me thinking, do people have the conversation about how to live a married life before they're married? Or do they fall in love, really enjoy spending time with each other, don't live with each other beforehand, and then decide to get married, and then all of a sudden they're thrust into this situation where they're trying to learn how to be married? And what happens when you get married and you have a definite difference of opinion on just almost anything from religion to parenting, whether you want to have kids, how you want to raise those kids, where you want to raise those kids. And I was thinking, my wife and I, we had talked about it before we got married. And part of that conversation was, it was brought on by the fact that we weren't of the same religion. And so one of the main questions we both had was, when we had children, how were we going to raise them and which faith were we going to raise them in? So, my wife being Jewish, I was Christian. I was always brought up, and my mother had always kind of put this in my head, that you always raise the children in the wife's religion.
Well, I think that also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's how the lineage works, at least in Judeo-Christian, or in the Jewish faith, is that whatever the mother is, that's what the children are.
I think that's right.
I think that's actually written down somewhere. But my wife and I had a similar, granted, not the difference between Jewish and Christian. She was Catholic and I was Episcopalian. So it was at least somewhere along the same vein. And we definitely talked about it. But we talked about a lot of, we met when we were 20. And then, we've been together ever since. So, we had a lot of discussions. But it's definitely something that I think people don't do. I think, the old joke, you got, don't buy the cow before you taste the milk, that sort of thing. But I think it goes further than that. It's definitely something where, anyone who's been in a roommate situation before, boys, buddies, hey, we're in college, let's get a house. And then next thing you know, their little tiny habits annoy you to death.
Right.
And it's so different with a spouse. If you've never lived together or spent a considerable amount of time together, you're not going to know that the fact that this person always leaves the cap off the toothpaste just drives you nuts. Or the fact that someone puts the toilet paper, just little tiny things, but after a while, those things definitely build up.
Right. And
so,
are they really, and a lot of these things are, okay, what is really going to annoy me? And then what shouldn't annoy me? What should I just let go? And even something as stupid as, you just mentioned, like the toothpaste.
Yeah.
Right. That drives me nuts.
Oh,
but it shouldn't, right?
It's the dumbest thing. It really is. Like, why would you get annoyed over toothpaste? But now I have to use that same toothpaste and the cap is off and you get all that scuzzy toothpaste glom around the outside of it. It needs to be removed.
Right.
So it's definitely something that, but I think a lot those annoyances, as long as it's built on a solid foundation, right,
are
good. Right. Not good, but you can deal with them. But when they get to the point where it's driving you nuts, that's probably more symptomatic than it is the actual cause.
Well, something little like the toothpaste thing, it's probably more that some other things are bothering you, and the accumulation of those things has led up to, And the toothpaste.
Yeah.
It's like the toothpaste is the thing that just reminds you of all the other things. For me, the toothpaste is I'm just really, really cheap and I want to get every single little drop of toothpaste out of the tube.
Oh, I will roll that thing up and I'm squeezing it. I'm like, I think there's a little bit more. And
but you can't do that when it's squeezed from the middle.
Right.
I want it squeezed from the bottom all the way. Although with the new ones now, they stand up and they don't squeeze, like the air doesn't come out of them.
Oh, I still get the cheap toothpaste.
You don't have the fancy tube.
No, I don't have that. I don't have that bougie toothpaste.
Well, one of the other things I was kind of interested about, and we were talking with some other friends tonight about how finances work in some of these relationships, and with my wife and I, we have a shared checking and a shared savings, and that's it. Mm-hmm. We also have some, shared credit cards and whatnot, but everything is shared. I guess there's another way to do this, and I wasn't really aware of it. And our friend and his wife have separate banking accounts, separate checks. So direct deposit goes into one for her, one for him. They may have a shared account somewhere, but I realized that that's not too out of the norm, I guess, because I was talking to another couple tonight, and they do the same thing.
Yeah, my aunt and uncle did that, and they're my parents' age, so they're obviously of a different generation. They did that. They kept everything separate. We do everything together, but we both had little side part-time gigs, so I had a account for that, and she had her own. So it was like your own little, that was my spending money, and hers as well. But all the bills and all the big paychecks went into one. So and now like, she has to handle. I'm terrible with bills. So she's very much the one that needs to do it, because if I do it, we'll be homeless. Right. So
yeah. So I manage the finances in our family. We used to have something where we were like, okay, well, what's the dollar threshold that you have to ask the other person? I think we ended up at like $500, which is fairly healthy, right? Mm-hmm. After a while though, I kind of told my wife, because after a while she was asking, hey, can I spend this amount? Can I spend that amount? And I didn't want to be the banker, right?
Right.
I don't want to I don't mind taking care of the bills and making sure everything gets paid, but I don't want to be the gatekeeper to what you can spend. And so eventually I just said, look, you have access to the bank account. Go in there. You know how much the mortgage is and how much the car payments are. Those are our biggest payments. As long as we have enough money in there to pay those, I said, then go ahead. Mm-hmm. Especially if it's a need for the house.
Right.
Like the other day, like I bought there was $100 and it was a jump booster pack for the car. Like these little battery packs that you can hook up to the positive and negative of the battery, so you don't need a jump from someone else.
Right.
And I bought it for the trip that we're going on, and it was $100, but it wasn't like it's not a toy, right? It's something that we needed. So do we run the $100 past it? No, not really.
Yeah. And that's something that you can use. That's like a durable good. Like you're going to use that thing for years.
Right.
So, it's not like you went out and spent $100 on a pair of socks.
No, but let's say like a couple of years ago, she wanted to go out to California to see a friend. She was like, hey, look, this is going to be about $1,000. It's cool. And, I was like, well, how did it look in the bank account? She's like, it looks fine. I was like, well, okay. I was like, as long as it works out time-wise, I said, go ahead. But again, though, it wasn't like I wanted to be the one to say yes or no. It's like, I don't want to be the one to cancel your trip, right?
Because you give permission.
Right. It's not that kind of marriage. Like so that took a little while to hash out. We definitely didn't talk. The only thing we talked about before we got married was joint accounts for everything. Mm-hmm. We never talked about spending limits or thresholds or anything like that. And we had to figure that out after the fact. And that was one of the few things that we didn't talk about before, just because it didn't come up. We never even thought about it. Probably because we were pretty poor at the time. We never thought we'd have or even have to talk about $1,000 expenses or something like that.
So you weren't going to spend $1,000 on anything.
No, we were living in an apartment at the time, so we didn't have home expenses or anything like that. But I mean, there's other issues I'm sure that come up. Like, you got to figure. I mean, do people talk about having kids before marriage?
Oh, we definitely did.
But then one thing you guys probably didn't talk about was your ideas on how to raise those kids.
Oh, no. Well, number one, because neither of us had any idea of how to do that. So, but, you know, I think we obviously are figuring it out, but we certainly did not go and say, oh, I'm going to talk it out with my kids, or I'm going to, you know, smack their butt. Like, we didn't have this conversation. Now, thankfully, though, we're kind of on the same page with a lot of how we do it. So sometimes big dad voice has to come in and handle the boys. But most of the time, you know, we're on the same page or in agreement with we might be tactically different. Strategically, though, it's the same. So we have similar, you know, like for our kids, we're not thinking, and this is, you know, like they have to go to college. Like, no, if they want to become a diesel mechanic or a plumber, God bless. In fact, I'd prefer it. But
I need a tradesman in the family, to be honest with you.
Like, you want to become
rates?
Yeah, you want to become an HVAC tech? Get on it,
right.
And you will have plenty of work right here. So we don't have that sort of thing where they have to go to college or they have to go into the military or they have to do this or that. We're not thinking like that. But as far as like our, you know, so strategically we're the same. Tactically, though, she might have some different tactics than I do. And sometimes her stuff works. Most of the time hers works. But sometimes we need to go my route. And I think the important part is knowing when to recognize that what you're doing isn't working and to allow the other one to jump in and not offer too many criticisms. So
yeah, I think the idea is the joint front. So even if you don't agree with how the other one is handling it, you don't say it in front of the kids. You talk about it after the kids are out of the picture, right?
Yeah.
So my wife and I have very different opinions on how the kids should be raised. You're right, though. Same end result, different tactics.
Yeah.
She's very much the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 person, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, and I've tried that counting, and essentially I'm just yelling numbers out. Well, I just yell what I want you to do, what I want them to do. So if I'm going to yell at them, I might as well convey a message to them rather than just count. Like, hey, we know you can count. You know, good job.
Well,
so,
my mother never counted.
No, I never got counted.
My mother grabbed the upper part of my arm and dragged me into my room if I didn't do what I was told. And that's how I was raised, so that's obviously how I started raising my kids.
Yeah, the slap grab.
Right. or even just, you're right, the dad voice.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, all I need to do is the voice, and they come to attention real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my wife now tries to do the mom voice, and the kids aren't having that.
Yeah. Sometimes the thing is, I'm more likely to get loud with the kids. When she gets loud, they know they screwed up. So, you know, she'll let them know when they screwed up. But like when she's starting to yell, like I yell, like they know that they really, like if they set mommy to that zone, then they know they screwed up. We never discussed that, but I think the important thing is just to give the other person the freedom to, the space or the room to navigate that how they want to without a constant, you know, oh, you should do this, you should do that. And certainly, like you said, never do it like in front of the audience, you know.
And I definitely didn't learn that up front. We both in the very beginning, now don't get me wrong, because the kids are so young, they don't really see it, right? Especially with the first kid. Everyone screws up with the first kid.
Yeah, I was the first kid, so. Yeah.
Well, that explains, you know. But, so, like, there were probably a couple times with the first kid, I was like, hey, you know, enough with the counting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't say it when the kid was asleep. It was in front of the kid, and that was not the right place to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's all that, it's the whole you live and learn stuff with that when it comes to that. Like I always wonder, when it comes to divorce, though, what broke down? Like, especially if you kind of went into it with the right expectations. Unless I got to imagine some people didn't.
No, I think some people out there get married, and I have a buddy that got married and he's now divorced. It was time for him to get married. All his friends were getting married, and he was engaged twice before he finally did get married. And then he got married. They had a couple kids, and it was, she was the ideal candidate for him, but they were completely incompatible. And I think they both did it because it was time for both of them, which doesn't, just doing it because because it's time. Like, like you can do that. Like if you need a gallon of milk, you go to the store and buy a gallon of milk,
right?
But you don't need to be married. Like, that's a gallon of milk a week. You're dumping that thing down the drain and you're getting another one. So,
well, I think with some, and I might get in a lot of trouble for this, but I think with some women, eventually it's the biological clock that's ticking.
No,
and they need to find a mate. But I think with some guys, eventually when you're the one or two last male friends, single friends in your group, and the other one's the guy you really don't like to begin with, and your married buddies don't hang out with you because you're trying to do single stuff, they're trying to do married stuff with their wife. So it's not that you're settling, but maybe that you're more receptive to the idea of getting married and saying, you know what, I'm not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to stop looking for someone else who's perfect, because that's not going to happen. It's just like the realization kind of comes to you, like,
Well, I think some dudes probably also get tired of just doing the same, meeting the bar floozies and whatever, and
right.
They eventually get tired of doing that. I have a friend who he finally got married, met a great woman, and they're awesome, but he was the last one, and he was also the oldest, but he was like the playboy. But then I think eventually you just get tired of living that life.
Right.
And at some point you need a partner. But the thing is, the girl that he met is like the perfect person for him, because they're both kind of, I don't want to say wild, but they both like going out. They both like doing all these things. So, she was the last one of her friends to get married, and it was the same type of deal. So I think it worked out great for them. I don't think either one of them is settling. There are some people out there that definitely do think, the older, I think the further along in age that people get, the advantage definitely shifts to the guys, to the dudes, because, their stuff works to the 80s, so.
It's funny you mentioned that, though, because apparently, and I was watching Tim Pool's podcast, and he had an expert on the show saying how the men, as they get older, especially if they're somewhat successful, I'm not talking like uber successful, but own a home, nice paying job, not only are they able to attract women in their own age group who may be getting a little bit thirsty, but the younger women, because they're looking for, the ones that are looking for marriage, stability, whatever, they're not finding it in the 20-year-old to 25-year-old men, because they're out still acting like dummies.
Yeah, because 25-year-old dudes are idiots.
Right. So this now early 30s, maybe mid-30s guy went from having minimal options in his 20s to now all of a sudden being the proverbial cow, who has all the goods that these young women are looking for, and also the mid-30s, young 30s women are looking for. But then on top of that, if he's got somewhat of a decent head on his shoulders, maybe even the post-divorcee 40s ladies.
Mm-hmm.
Like that mid-30s for a guy isn't a bad place to be. But even in your 40s and your 50s as a guy, if you've got your stuff together a little bit and aren't a complete conceited jerk, you're probably going to have some options.
Yeah, and especially people as they get older generally have a little bit more money. And not that these girls are looking for money, but
money factors into the stability.
Right. Let's be completely honest. Like if a guy has a established career, and that's, not just put a dude, but anyone, if they have an established career, there's like you said, stability. They're not working from restaurant job to restaurant job. They're working for a company or for the government, whatever they're doing, and they've been there for a while. So they're probably not going to be like, oh, hey, let's pick up and go work at this bar, and I'm going to move down to Key West now, and I'm going to saunter over here and do, oh, now I'm going to be a social media influencer, whatever kind of nonsense they're doing. And I think when they're, the younger dudes are still doing that, and especially if it, still in decent shape, that sort of thing. Yeah. So that ship has sailed for me.
You still get that swipe left on Tinder.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing all right.
Yeah. So, but there's a great line in I believe it was in 40-Year-Old Virgin, and with what's the dude's name? Not Seth Rogen, but his buddy, or not his buddy, but his. No, it's Knocked Up. I'm sorry, Knocked Up.
Paul Rudd.
Yes, Paul Rudd, and she says, "I keep getting older, and he keeps getting better looking," and I think there's something to that, and I think that kind of plays into it, but.
A little bit. Although I think women get harder on themselves.
Absolutely.
When it comes to their looks. I mean, how many times, I always tell my wife, I think she looks great without makeup. But when we go out, she's still putting it on. I was like, why do you do this? She goes, I put it on for me.
Yeah. I tell my wife the same thing. Yeah. And, she says, but she still puts it on. And, but I wonder if some of this stuff, like, some of the other issues that kind of transcend. If we talked about religion earlier. How do people, now the thing is, like, you can be of two different faiths, but still be grounded principally in your principles as far as that sort of thing goes. If you're, and I don't think it matters whether no, I'm not saying you're like, I'm a jihadist and my wife is, Catholic. Like, I think there'd be some difficulties there. Where are you going? I'm running out to go fight with ISIS. Like, I think that would be, I think that would be a deal breaker. But I think if you're, there's a great line in The Simpsons where Ned Flanders, where Reverend Lovejoy's holding Ned Flanders, and he says, have you tried any other major religions? They're all pretty much the same. Yeah. But when you think about it, they're all grounded in principle. So regardless of the faith, as long as you still have those shared principles, I believe my wife and I did and still do, so it was easier. But, if you're, so what do you do if someone's super, super religious and the other one's like, eh?
Yeah, well, I don't think those people end up together, right? I don't think an Orthodox Jewish person is marrying the atheist. I don't think that's not happening. Yeah. Right?
No, but I could definitely see they get together under one, with one, and then all of a sudden one of them goes and decides, now I'm going to become a born again Christian.
Right.
And, there are definitely people that decide to make that jump later in life. Now, can the marriage survive that? Because if you want to think of it as a contract, it was entered under one set of circumstances, but now one of the parties has changed their expectations.
I don't think it survives that drastic of a change.
Yeah.
Now, in my example, we had lengthy discussions over the religion aspect of it. A lot of it also had to do with traditions, because the traditions in each religion were different.
Right.
Yeah. Jewish people aren't celebrating Christmas. Well, some of my happiest memories as a child were from Christmas. I mean, I was very fortunate to have my parents had very nice Christmases.
Yeah.
Extended family for Christmas. I mean, so I had very deep childhood memories in it. I wasn't willing to give that up. Unfortunately, my wife was like, well, I don't want you to give it up either. We'll just celebrate it all.
Yeah.
And so that was the compromise.
And the kids cash in.
Right. I mean, my kids, my daughter's using, plastic bags for all the gifts at this point. Piggy banks got too small, so everything's going in Ziploc bags now. For the gift cards and the toys There's so many toys. It's ridiculous.
They don't play with any of them.
None of them. But so in our case, though, that was the compromise, because neither one of us Well, I shouldn't say neither one of us. My wife was probably more into the Jewish religion than I was into the Christian religion. I was more into the traditions and the holidays, or I was more into the traditions, not necessarily the holiday of it.
Right.
So I wanted to keep the traditions going. And so I went into it with eyes wide open. And because she was open to keeping my traditions alive, that made that transition a lot easier. And I think we're going on 12 years or so. Haven't had an issue in that. We have, as far as like schooling, when we decided on a preschool, our kids did go to Jewish preschool, which I was fine with, even when it got a little bit religion-y in the preschool. It just wasn't over the top religion-y, because within the Jewish faith, they have reform temples. So it's a little bit looser with the religion. I mean, I shouldn't say looser. That's not the right word, but it's not like an Orthodox church or a conservative church where it's a little bit more by the book. In fact, the preschool had non-Jewish kids in there as well.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that just based upon availability and
cost.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of what it came down to. So that helped with a lot of stuff though. Like my kids now go to public school. They're not in a religious school. Now we have talked about furthering the religious education as far as like, I don't even know what they call it in the Jewish religion.
Going to Hebrew school and doing bat mitzvah and all that.
Yeah. We have no clue what we're going to do with that still. But mostly because we're both open to whatever. Mm-hmm. I think neither one of us want to make a decision. Yeah. You know, it comes more down to our indecisiveness than anything on this. And we have time, but at some point we've got to decide if the oldest one's going to go to Hebrew school. Yeah. Because you can't just learn everything in like a weekend. No. So she can't just be like, hey, I'm 16 or I'm 13. I want to do it.
Right. Like even like my son just had his first communion and he had to go to, they call it prep in the Catholic Church. So he had to do that. And that's at least in the same language. Yeah. With the same alphabet.
Yeah. She's got to learn a whole nother alphabet language. You're not learning that on a Thursday.
No. And like Logan, and it was virtual prep, which was essentially homeschooled. Right. Yeah. But, you know, my kids, they went to religious preschool. Now, granted, it was a Methodist preschool, but so it wasn't.
But neither one of you were Methodist, right?
No. No. You know what? It was cheap.
Yeah.
It wasn't cheap, but they were good.
It was less expensive. Let's put it, it's less expensive than others.
Right.
Some of these schools are crazy expensive.
Yeah.
For preschool, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, $14,000 a year for preschool. What? Yeah, I didn't pay that much for my undergrad. You know, like that's insane.
Right? We could probably do a whole episode on the cost of preschool, by the way.
Yep, mostly, yeah.
It's insane to me.
And then we can make fun of the people that spend tons of money. But
luckily, we're not sailing in that ship.
No.
So
no, I'm not dropping off Buffy and Junior at the $14,000 a year preschool out of the Range Rover.
Right.
I'm not in that set. But you know, when you go to the religion, and then you know, there's so many other things like politics. My wife she's more liberal than I am. And it's fun to send jabs back and forth at one another. Whenever something messed up happened, like, yeah, you thank your Democrat friends on that one. Say, shut up. So, but I'm more into the topic than she is. However, there are people that are super into politics that fall on opposite sides of the spectrum. James Carville and Mary Madeline were, right. One was a Democrat operative, the other one was a Republican. Like they were complete opposite sides of the spectrum. And how they reconcile that. So, this
is a good story about that kind of dynamic. And if you ever get a chance to watch the movie Recount, and it recalls a story of when Al Gore and George W. Bush were contesting Florida for the election of who was president.
Hanging chads and...
Yeah, all that stuff. And there comes to a point, it's a very small scene in the movie where... I don't remember who was doing the asking, but I think it was the person who was playing Ron Klain was the guy who was in House of Cards, Kevin Spacey.
Okay.
I think that was the guy. I don't remember exactly. Anyway, and he was asking the guy who was playing the character of James Baker, and James Baker was a longtime Bush family political operative. Mm-hmm. Operative being a horrible word, but he worked on a lot of their political.
Wasn't he Bush or one of their chief of staff?
Yeah, chief of staff, secretary. I think he was Secretary of State for one of them. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, the question came up of, Baker mentioned that he was a lifelong Democrat. Mm-hmm. And so, and the other person asked, well, how did you end up working for the Bushes? And he basically said his wife had just died, and George H.W. Bush, the father, the senior Bush, was just a family friend. They were family friends, and he said, look, I'm running this campaign. Why don't you come on the campaign and work for me? And he said, I'm not in the same political party as you. He goes, it doesn't matter. You can come and do anything you want. Mm-hmm. And that's how he started working for the Bush family as a Republican, and he never left. So, I mean, the funny, I find it interesting that people get so enthralled in politics and that they're right, you're wrong. And yet the people who are in neck deep in the politics.
Like that's their job. Like that's their life.
Right. It's their life. And even to them, the politics aren't that entrenched in them.
Yeah.
But anyway, as far as the marriage goes, my wife is also much more liberal than I am. Although I would say a few years ago, 5-6 years ago, I was still probably in the blue camp.
Oh, my switch has been more recent, and like I said, I've always been more into it. And when I kind of started looking the other way, she's like, "How are you doing that? Like, you hate these people." Yep. I was like, "Well, I'm woke, right. But not that kind of woke." Like I kind of started seeing things a little bit differently. I think that's natural with as you get older. Your career stuff starts changing. You start having kids. Like some of the stuff that you used to hold dear starts to not really kind of make a lot of sense anymore. And then her not being into it. I think if we were to really get down to the granularity of it, I think we'd probably be a lot closer than we are, than it seems.
Yeah.
So, but I had kind of, and I don't know whether I've moved right or everybody else just moved left.
That's true too.
So I think I like to say that, I, of course, am the most virtuous. So they, of course, moved past me. I am rock solid. They flopped.
Well, I think it definitely goes with the polarity of the political group. I want to say probably 8 to 10 years ago, I never would have thought that I could ever vote for Republicans again. Mm-hmm. Because of how far right they attacked with that whole Tea Party movement.
Yep.
Right. And they were of the mind that if you didn't believe exactly what we believe, this loud minority of the group, then you're not a Republican. You're not a patriot.
Yeah.
They kept throwing around that word patriot. They still do. It drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Well, now it's the left side who can be the most left.
Yeah.
Who can be so left you can't move any more left.
Yeah.
And I think I've always been of the mind where, if I can't retain my views, because I'm not going to be swayed by somebody else, mm-hmm. I'm going to be very open socially. I would like people to be fiscally conservative on the other side of things, even though that hasn't happened in I don't know how many years.
On either side, really.
Right? But I'm also not going to be forced into saying something I don't believe in either. And that's what both sides have always, eventually they kind of get their britches and they try and say, well, this is how it is. And this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to say it. No.
Yeah.
I'm keeping my points of view.
Mm-hmm.
Whichever one of you is least demanding of me to feel, what's the word I'm thinking about? To bend the knee, then I'm going to go there. I'm going to go with them.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm not going to be forced into some opinions. It's just not going to happen for me.
Yeah.
But my wife, on the other hand, she's more of she's got a single issue in which she always will vote for.
Mm-hmm.
That's who she's voting with because they stand for this.
Yeah.
The rest of it doesn't matter to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And there are definitely some people on both sides. It doesn't matter which side I'm kind of tacking toward at the moment. I can point to either side and be like, wow, I can't believe you guys are saying this. Like, this is some really bad stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to be standing at least on this side of the line with you, even if I'm not fully over there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not building my house over here. I'm just over here with a tent that I can pull up and move over here.
Right. You park the RV there over there every now and then.
Right. I'm not even putting the jacks down. You know what I'm saying? I'm here temporarily until you go nuts.
Yeah.
Because the other side's super nuts.
Mm-hmm.
She's more of the opinion of, this is the topic that I believe in. This is what I'm voting for.
Well, there are a lot of single issue voters out there. You know, abortion's a single issue. They're one. It doesn't. Policy prescription. You could fall, but if they don't agree with you on that one, they're not getting your vote.
Right.
Second Amendment's another one. They can believe everything. You know, and these different issues come up. Death penalty used to be one of them, but I think that's kind of, kind of going away.
You haven't really heard about it much.
No, and it's but there are definitely people go and say, oh well, I vote for the fiscal conservative, but then the fiscal conservative goes and spends trillions of dollars.
That blows my mind. We're the party of fiscal conservatism. Really? Because you blew up the budget more than the last guy.
Yeah.
And then the next guy comes in and does it. And then let's say it switches back to the Republican Party and they blow it up even more.
Yeah, they just blow it up on different stupid crap.
Oh, it's like, come on. It's
one
of you's. One.
Yeah.
Can you stop with the increase in spending?
Yeah.
Well, and then inflation, kind of have to.
Yeah.
Like, get out of here.
Yeah, inflation that you caused.
Right.
You set the house on fire, and now you want to charge me money to put it out.
Right.
Like, that's the problem. Like, they like to stand there and say, well, you started the fire. Like, you started all of this, and now you want a medal for ending it, and it doesn't make any sense. But no one calls them out on it.
No. Well, the other side does,
right?
But
they're doing the same exact thing on the.
But the people in the echo chamber don't hear that,
right?
And then you get maybe the far right guy will say it, but the people in the middle don't hear that either.
Yeah,
that's a completely different podcast, though.
But I think
as far as the marriage part goes, though, how do you reconcile those differences?
Yeah, I think with politics, it's if you're going to let that fracture your marriage, and that's the symptom. There's another cause to that symptom. There are certain things, where you take something goofy like sports teams. If you're a huge fan of this team or that team, Cowboy fan, Redskin fan, Steeler fan, Ravens fan, Caps fan, whatever you wanted to make it, that shouldn't fracture your marriage. That should make it more fun. Right. Because now my wife is not a huge sports person. She did fall in love with Tom Brady. I think just about every woman fell in love with Tom Brady.
You got a beautiful chin.
Yeah. Back in, when did he first break into the league? 2002, something like that.
Let's face it, there's some dudes that love Tom Brady. We know one of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, and since he left the Patriots, I don't hate him as much. I also don't hate the Patriots as much.
Look, for me, it's Belichick. He is Darth Vader. He is the worst human on earth.
Well, no, maybe he's not Darth Vader. I think he's Emperor Palpatine.
Oh.
Tom Brady was Darth Vader. Yeah, because Darth Vader became good was good, and then bad, and then good again in Empire or in Return of the Jedi. So Brady is Darth Vader, and Belichick is Emperor Palpatine.
I suppose. I don't know if I'm going to be able to like either one of them. But you're right, though. My strong feelings are much less than they were.
Right.
Yeah. When they were both together.
No, I was rooting for Brady. I just thought it was cool that he was there, and I wouldn't say rooting for Brady in the Super Bowl because I really didn't care. My team was out. It was kind of neat to see him do it though. With
a weird dynamic. I'm a fan of Patrick Mahomes I like Andy Reid. I have nothing against the Chiefs, but I still rooted against them in the Super Bowl. Mostly because they beat the Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs beat the Ravens. I was all up in my feelings about that. By the time we got to the Super Bowl, and I was like, you know what? Go for it, Tom. You get yours.
Yeah.
Sorry, Patty.
Yeah.
You know?
You know what, Pat? You've got a whole bunch of years left in this league.
Listen, man, they look so unbeatable sometimes. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, they look like what the Patriots used to be.
Oh, yeah.
As far as how well they do on Sundays. And it's like, as a fan of another AFC team, like, I'm worried that no one's going to be able to stop them, at least for the next 5 years.
Yeah, and the thing is, at least there were certain AFC teams that did beat the Ravens. Beat them. That was one of the greatest games. That was a great game.
That was regular season, though, wasn't it?
That
wasn't playoff.
No, they beat them in the playoffs.
The Ravens game?
This was back when the Ravens won the Super Bowl in 13.
No, that was before Patrick. This is before the current regime.
Yes.
This current regime is what scares me. They look unbelievable.
But when you said the Patriots back in...
Oh, no, you're right.
Back then.
Yeah, they definitely...
Yeah.
Listen, that was a fantastic run. I'm a huge Lamar fan, though.
Mm.
I want to see Lamar win it.
Yeah.
Just because whenever I watch national sports news, there's a lot of hate on that dude. And locally, there's beyond love for this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Just because, one, he's so young.
Yep.
But two, he's like the most likable human being on earth.
Yeah, he's humble. He's not...
He's super humble.
Yeah.
He's going to high school football games.
Yeah.
Like, he's just hanging out.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I hope you win 20. But I'm also biased.
Right. But, yeah. Luckily, though, football-wise, my wife would be a Giants fan. She was.
Look, our wives are from the same island.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife is converted to being a Purple fan.
But
she was never a Giant fan.
So my wife liked the Giants because, so my father-in-law is from Massachusetts. He's a huge Patriots fan. And I give it to him. You know what? You're from Massachusetts. You can like the Patriots all you want. Like, and not people can like where they want, but it's permissible at that point. He also likes the Red Sox. I hate the Red Sox.
We've talked about this before.
Yeah, I hate them more than I hate the Yankees.
Yep.
But the thing is okay, and you know, if she liked the Patriots, I'd be okay with it because a lot of people just like who their dad likes.
Right.
Especially if you're not into it. But she was kind of a Giants fan, and then we started going to some Ravens games. Hey, this is fun. And she had fun. One year, a friend of mine came into some season tickets, and we went to every game and tailgated. And the Ravens atmosphere is really it's a cool going to their games, and they don't have their stadiums downtown, so you don't have the big huge open parking lots that you would in a suburban stadium. So the tailgates are like little pockets, and she had a great time going to those. So that's what we did. And she's a bit of a convert. I guess if she were to identify as anything, she would say she's a Ravens fan. But if the Giants do well, she'll root for them. Never the Jets. She must hate the Jets.
The Jets are abysmal. That's why.
Right. And, Jets suck. So, but Jets fans are obnoxious because every year they think they're winning the Super Bowl. Every single year.
Yeah. I don't think marriages, though, are splitting up over sports, right?
No, I think you'd have to be pretty, again, symptomatic. You'd have to be pretty crazy.
But I think politics kind of fall on the same level as sports because at the end of the day, your daily life isn't affected by any of this politics nonsense.
Right. And the thing is, like, the athletes don't care about you, neither do the politicians. Right. So you're kind of like being a fan.
Right.
So
yeah, I can see how how politics wouldn't drive marriages apart. But I do wonder, sports obviously not a big factor, but with the politics of it, though, I wonder if people do talk about their politics before they get married, because I certainly did not.
No,
even if I did, my politics or mostly my politics have probably changed since we.
Yeah, mine have been one. Like, if you're to draw that thing, we talked about before, where someone went and became the super religious guy. Like, I kind of left from where I was before, from her expectation of what she thought mine. But to me, it's been an improvement. She may disagree with, but I think it's been an improvement.
Actually, let me. I don't think my politics have changed. I think the parties have changed around me.
Right.
I think my politics for the most part have remained the same, minus a couple of policies, minor policies here and there. I think mostly it's a live and let live thing.
Yeah.
And again, whoever's not going to yell at me the most is probably where I'm going to go.
Right. And there are some things where I fall pretty liberal on, some topics where I certainly fall pretty liberal on. And I'm not going to put myself in a box. But I think the tide has kind of, if you look at the jetty that sticks out into the ocean, sometimes it looks really tall. It's like, oh man, that's a big jetty. And then other times you can't see it. Well, the jetty's still there. It's just the ocean moving around it. So I think that's where I'm at. But, I wonder if how people change. Sometimes you have that. You ever see that old putz? Think of an old putz in your head. Mm-hmm. And you're like, look at that old putz. At some point in that old putz's life, he's probably a pretty cool dude. But now he's an old putz. And does that change have an effect on a marriage too? Like, hey, you got married for, reasons A, B, C, and D, and now all of a sudden, dude or she's not meeting that A, B, C, and D, and they're just kind of an old putz. Maybe they just get sick of each other.
Right. I always wonder. So I'm still in my 40s, but I acted like an old curmudgeon in my 20s.
Yeah.
So my wife met me when I was an old curmudgeon.
Get off my lawn.
I always told her I'm an 80-year-old man in a 20-year-old man body. I always have been. I always will be. I don't want to go out. I don't want to do things. I'm not into the bar scene. I don't like any of this stuff. I like 6 people, and 2 or 3 of them are my family.
Right.
Right. Exaggeration, of course, but I'm not in it. I'm not out there to make like 55 friends. I don't want the super shiny teeth grinning at me all the time and then talking crap behind me about my back.
Right.
I want 5 to 6 good friends, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
And if I don't leave my basement or if I don't leave my living room, I'm fine with that too.
Mm-hmm.
She knew that when she married me.
Right. So you didn't just spring this on her.
No, absolutely not.
You weren't like bounce around the bar scene and running trivia night and doing all this stuff. Like you were pretty much this is Well,
I mean, I do dig a good trivia night, so. But she was also of the mindset of, okay, that's fine, but I do want to. You will get out of the house and do some things every once in a while because that's what I like to do.
Yeah.
She's like, we'll find a medium.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't know if everyone's having that conversation ahead of time. And I wonder, you're right, as people kind of change in the marriage and in the relationship, maybe it's just not for the other person or whatever. I don't know. I'm sure there's a number of reasons why that could happen.
Yeah. Maybe people put on a show in the beginning and that's not who they are. They can't maintain it.
Oh, I think there's a big part of it. I think there's a big part of it.
Maybe you also want your wife or your husband to bring the best out of you. So when my wife and I met, she said I was very negative and a negative sense of humor. Possible. Probably still possibly true.
I don't see it. So you're a lovely human being. Yeah. Don't let anyone tell you different.
But I can definitely say for certain that she's kind of brought a better side of me out where before, I wasn't the one who'd make a joke at a party or carry on a conversation. I kind of stay in the corner and count down till it's time to leave. That's kind of what I did. And then since I met her, because of her personality, like she kind of brought that other side out of me, which I think is nice. And I think if you have that person, regardless of where you fall when it comes to religion, politics, whatever, you be complete opposite sides of the spectrum. As long as that other person brings the best out of you, that's going to survive. If that person brings the worst out of you, when you're complaining about the toothpaste cap being off, and or the fact that I didn't take the trash out for the 15th time, then I think at that point it's then that's when that other stuff starts to fester and grow.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the whole go to a party and count down until you can leave. I still do that to this day. Like we go somewhere and like, if I'm not going to be the one to shut the party down.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm ready to go home and go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't get me wrong. The time that I'm spending there, I'm having a good time.
Yeah.
That's probably the compromise. That's bringing out the best part. But my wife, if she could, she would stay until like the last second before this thing is over with. And I'm like, look, we've been here for 2 hours. I'm good. and somewhere along the line, we've come to a compromise as far as, look, if I just got to get out of here, I'll give you the nod and we got to go. At the same time, I'm not going to give you the nod every time we go somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I know you want to stay.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things. It's a large amount of compromise, and I think that's what every marriage is based on, right?
Yeah.
But I do wonder if some of these marriages break up because they're not having conversations beforehand about expectations. Mm-hmm. Like you said, it's a contract.
Yeah. You're
dealing with a completely separate human being. You're not going to force them to do what you want to do. Unless it's that kind of relationship, in which case it's probably not going to end well anyway.
Right. There's nothing wrong with it if there is. Yeah. But I mean, there's some people that
that's not a marriage. It's a hostage situation.
Yeah. Well, and so, I mean, sometimes you see that, that feckless dude just getting henpecked. Oh, yeah. And it's some dudes just like to be bossed around.
True.
And there's a difference between being bossed around and picking your battles.
Right.
Or like, I just don't feel like dealing with that right now. What do you want to do?
Right.
Okay, sure. Your idea is fine. And a lot of times it's like, yeah, I really don't have anything better anyway. So.
Yeah. I do wonder though. And I to be honest with you, I haven't dated in years. Thank God. Because I don't think I could deal with any of that garbage anymore. Mm-mm. I do wonder if couples are having the conversations before they get married, though. You know what I mean? I know, like in certain, in certain religions, depending on how religious both of them are, they have to sit down and talk with a priest.
Yeah. So if you want to get married in the Catholic Church, you have to go through what's called pre-cana.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have to sit there, and it used to be a priest that would talk to you about being married. My question would be, what does a priest know about being married?
Right. Well,
or paying bills.
Yeah, I think it was, but with that one, it was more of, are you willing to be in a marriage that adheres to the church's protocol?
So now they've changed it, and when my wife and I did pre-cana, it was a married couple that sat there and talked to all of us about being married, which I think was I mean, I got something out of it. At first I went to it like, oh, like there's a game on. I'd rather do anything but this. And then I'm sitting there and, I had some things in common with the male half of this couple. So, it actually was beneficial. But again, it was a 2 hour, like an evening at a church. It wasn't an in-depth conversation, and you can fake the funk for 2 hours. You can fake the funk for 2 years, but eventually you're going to get tired of faking the funk, and all of a sudden you're now, it's the true colors are starting to shine through.
Yeah, it's not something that my wife and I went through, mostly because, I mean, we never really thought about that. Mm-hmm. And obviously we're still kicking, the marriage is still kicking strong today.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if something like that would have been beneficial. Not necessarily a priest or a rabbi, but maybe a rabbi, because rabbis get married. But having another married couple to talk about things before you jump into marriage. Now, my wife and I were also in a different situation. And you were too, where your parents had stayed together. Mm-hmm. Your wife's parents had stayed together. Yeah. My parents had stayed together. My wife's parents had stayed together. You had that model of two parents that stayed together, worked through some issues. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily we saw all the issues, but we knew there must have been some compromise going on in the background. Now, I think if we had met a younger couple that we could have talked to about marriage things, maybe the wife with the wife and the husband with the husband type of deal, where you can kind of get an idea of things, as long as they're going to be honest with you about their situations. If you have questions about it, I think that's beneficial. I do.
I I think that kind of happens to a certain extent because, you know, I work with I work with a bunch of young people, you know, they're, you know, and when I was a young dude working with these older guys, I'll never forget when I was, one of the senior guys at work was like, "Hey dude," and I forget what we were talking. We were talking about something with the wives. And I guess at the time she was my girlfriend. And he said, "Look, hate every third thing." Huh? He goes, "Yeah. When you're planning your wedding," I think that's what we were talking about, planning the wedding. He's like, "There's going to be a lot of stuff that you just don't care about. Like, you don't care about the colors of the napkins. You're probably going to care about the bar and the DJ, and that's about it. And that's about right. And the food." But he said, "Hate every third thing." And I was like, "Well, okay." He goes, "Because it shows that you care. Because if you just say yes to everything, it means you don't care. Right. However, if you hate every third thing, whether you do or not, and what it worked out to do, you know, and that's the type of advice that maybe it's bad, but at least you're talking to somebody else who's doing it. Right. So it happens informally. But if someone is just, now, for whatever reason, my group of friends, most of them, are all still married. They come from, their parents are all still married. And this is across the spectrum of all my different groups of friends. Most of them are still married, and those of them who are married, they come from homes where the parents are still married. So it's kind of a weird thing. Like, we all kind of found each other. So I had you have a lot of, that older guy advice, like, "Hey dude, you know, you might not want to do that."
Right. Yeah.
So, but it's not formal. But if you have people that come from train wreck backgrounds, right, they're not going to get that solid advice from anyone. Yeah.
It's a good advice, especially for any younger guys, women even, that are listening to this. You know, don't just jump into marriage without at least some kind of an idea of what it takes to be married. And you know, whether you talk to other women or other men that are married, religious counseling, whatever it is, even if it's your own parents. I know it would be awkward to talk about marital advice with parents, but at least you have an idea of what you're jumping into. And then also on top of that, don't be afraid to have those conversations with who you're going to get married with before you get married. Because the hard conversations in the beginning could lead to much easier conversations down the road. With that being said, please like, subscribe, share this podcast video wherever you're watching it. Rate us on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. This stuff really helps us out a lot. And we hope you enjoyed this show, and we will see you next time.